Josh.
Hello, Tony.
Well, welcome back. That was a very good episode. I feel like we are. It's interesting that concept of objectification seems to come up again and again. And in this scenario, it sounded like the. I mean, and my heart goes out to the spouse because I think I don't know, when you're working in this world of betrayal. I do feel like so often the spouse is trying to make sense of what the addict or the person is doing from their lens, and then they made this observation and a judgment, and then they're saying, now I want to ask you questions because I want to feel better. And but it's almost like they're saying, but I need you to answer the questions the way I need you to answer them, even though I know you don't know that, and I actually don't know what I want to hear. But if you can just answer them to calm my central nervous system down, that would be really helpful. So that, feel like there's a lot of things going on under the surface there that are just probably feel maddening. So you had mentioned something. Take us on your train of thought.
I have never done very much of this unless I ever went to a strip club.
Okay, tell me more.
And I've never really enjoyed strip clubs.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly why, but in thinking about this, I was thinking about how maybe it's not in my nature to objectify.
Hmm. Okay.
And I was thinking about how a lot of the clients that I have um, actually say, no, I don't drive down the street and just leer at women.
Hmm. Okay.
And it's like, yeah, no, I don't either. And I know guys do because, and some people do because they've told me this. But I was thinking about, perhaps I didn't like strip clubs because
Hmm.
I am not actually a fan of objectification. I remember growing up, and I remember working my first job ever at a mall. I worked at a little kiosk that sold baseball cards.
Ah.
And I remember there were these two particularly crude security guards who there wasn't a lot to do at the mall, so everybody got to kind of know each other.
Ah.
And they would stop by my kiosk because they both liked baseball cards, and I talked to them. But whenever there was a pretty woman going by, they would say the most crude stuff to each other and comment on her body. And I never participated, and I never quite understood that.
Okay.
Because to me, it feels like if you're going to objectify somebody that much, if you're going to look at somebody and have those thoughts, they should almost be somebody special.
Hmm. Okay.
And these guys were just objectifying anybody, much like people do at a strip club.
Ah.
And as I look back, I think, I have actually had a problem with objectifying. So, how do I line that up with the fact that I was a porn addict for so long?
Yeah.
Can I have been a porn addict and not have been an objectifier? Because I don't mind talking about this stuff, and I talk about this stuff with clients, but there are times where, as a former porn addict, I don't relate.
It isn't that I try to tell somebody, no, you do objectify, because I do find that when it starts to come up in a session, that then somebody then becomes aware that they do, and it isn't like they say, oh, I do it all the time. I think a lot of times they start from a place of, well, I don't do that, almost like they're like, I couldn't, I'm not that guy, I'm not the security mall guy or whatever. But then I think you're right, though, where there are other people that it never comes up in sessions, and it isn't a part of treatment or recovery. And so I just, I'm never going to have to tell somebody, or I don't feel like I need to tell somebody, no, you probably do. You just don't know. Cause then that's a me issue as a therapist, and I even feel like that becomes a part of there in the 70s, 80s. There was a whole lot of negativity around therapists pulling out, I want to air quote, repressed memories, because there's a lot of people that believe that, but if it's repressed and I don't really remember it, but then I'm there almost like to get validation from the therapist, then I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe that happened. And if the therapist is like, there you go, okay, see, it's coming closer. But there are certain people that just don't, they maybe didn't feel or can't pull up the trauma. And so why wouldn't there be people that say, I really don't think I do this. And it isn't somebody else to tell them, I think you probably do. I think you're just in denial. But then I like that it's, because your visceral reaction to those security guards is so like, this is what kind of crazy. So then, maybe that speaks to what it feels like to be you on the inside, that it's like, not that I couldn't do that, so I have to pretend I'm not, but it's like, no, I don't think I do that. Well, Josh, I'm wondering too, and again, I love that we're just spitballing this, because I do feel like there could almost be a disconnect then that would even drive shame more if there's somebody that sees the security guard example and they're thinking, I don't do that. But then if they're now all of a sudden looking at porn, and here are these women that they're in essence objectifying on the screen, that then it's like, okay, but at least I'm not the security guard. Kind of goes back to that. I'm not a horrible person.
Right.
And so maybe, or it could be even the opposite, of where now all of a sudden somebody's looking at porn, and in those moments, oh my gosh, I'm that security guard. But then in their day to day, they're like, I couldn't be that guy, because that guy's
Yeah.
gross, and that isn't me. So, in my day to day life, then I am anything but the security guard. Like, I cannot be that. But then it's like that, that paradox of, in that
And
moment.
maybe that helped me hide my addiction for
That's
so many
yeah. That's
years.
like that's what I'm curious. Like, I haven't thought of it that way. Yeah.
Maybe because I didn't act certain ways.
Yeah.
Another thing is that, I talk about porn-induced erectile dysfunction all the time with my clients.
Huh.
I never actually had it.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things where I almost feel like there are things about being a porn addict that I have trouble relating to.
Yeah. You
And
didn't do very well.
I
Yeah.
just wonder if that's true of all porn addicts, that there are three or four symptoms that every porn addict doesn't have, that kind of pushes them away from, no, I'm not that guy because I have the stereotype of that guy in my head.
Well, I think that part, I will tell you, the pulling the old therapist card out is so true, because I will have people to say, I don't think it's a problem because I don't have any problem with erectile dysfunction. And almost like, see, so I check that box, so I'm good. And so I can
Yeah,
see that being another thing of where, no, I don't objectify people on the outside. And so I'm fine. So I must not have a problem. So I like where you're going with that. I wonder what some of those other symptoms are. I don't own a trench coat, so
yeah,
I can't be. I mean, being funny about it, but I don't. Yeah, that would be it. I have a good job. I make good money. I provide for my family. I couldn't be. I don't objectify. I don't have erectile dysfunction. So like, yeah, all those things that could build up for somebody to say. So it's not a problem.
right. And I think that, one of the questions I still get a lot of the time is, can a woman be an addict?
Okay, talk about that.
And well, it's just interesting in that, obviously women can be addicts.
Yeah,
I treat a couple, and as I'm sure you do, um, people who are in denial tend to look for the symptoms they don't have.
yeah. Well, and
So they
and,
can
and
say
this,
to their wife, well,
yeah,
no, I don't leer at people. You can
yeah,
watch me all day long. I don't leer at people. When I'm at work, I don't leer at people. Meanwhile, I might be spending 2 hours looking at porn at
exactly.
work, but I'm not leering at people.
Yeah, I know. In my Path Back men's group, there's a guy that talks about his time in prison, and he said that everybody still has that. Well, at least I'm not that guy. At least I don't. And we'll have a lot of the guys in the group will say that they do that. They're like, well, at least I don't look at underage girls, or at least I don't have erectile dysfunction, or at least I don't. So we call it that. At least I don't. So that I must not be theory. And I know that these episodes that we're doing are evergreen. So people are going to listen to this well into the next millennium, I'm sure. But at the time that we're recording this, a few days ago, I released a very powerful episode of my virtual couch podcast, where I interviewed a couple that they found that their daughter had died of an overdose, and it's a sad interview, but it's also very powerful, and they talk about all the things that they went through and learned. But one of the things they talked about was not acknowledging their daughter's porn addiction early, because they did have a feeling of, but girls don't do this. And so they were saying that it was really hard to wrap their heads around when she first started talking about it, that it would be a thing, because she was a girl and she was really young, and so it couldn't be a thing. And they're not saying that was the slippery slope that led to the end, but but they just talked about how easy it is to ignore a lot of red flags because, and so I've already received a lot of feedback from people saying that was very powerful because, they're like, wait, the teenage girls don't have a problem like this, right? I don't know if you ever heard the poem, or it's a poem and address called "This Is Water" by a guy named David Foster Wallace. Are you familiar with him?
I know the name, I don't know the
I always
poem.
did too, and I honestly can tell you right now that I think in my more emotionally immature or narcissistic days, I would have pretended that I know exactly who he is. I've read lots of his work, but I don't really know if he's done other work. But this is an amazing address. I think it's one of those where he says it to a graduating class. But he just the premise, and I'll just jump right to the middle because I like the conversation we've had already. Two young fish swimming along. They happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way. He nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks at the other one and says, uh, "What the hell is water?" Because they're just being, they're just doing. They don't know that they are in water. They don't know that what they are going through in their life. It's just what they think. This is just what I'm doing. They don't know that there's context. And then here's what he says, which I think is really interesting. He said a huge percentage of the stuff that I tend to be automatically certain of, it turns out, is totally wrong and diluted. And he said, I learned this the hard way, as he predicted these graduates would. And he said, here's one example of the total wrongness of something I tend to be automatically sure of. And again, I'm saying this in the context of a wife saying, "Oh, I see what he's doing. So I know, like, I know what he's doing. I can fill in all the blanks." But he said, I tend to be automatically sure of everything in my own immediate experience supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid, and important person in existence. And he said, we rarely think about this sort of natural, basic self centeredness because it's socially repulsive, but it's the same for all of us. Our default setting, hardwired into our boards at birth. There's no experience you have had that you are not the absolute center of, that the world that you experience is in front of you, behind you, the left of you, the right of you, on your phone, on your computer, on your monitor. And he said, so other people's thoughts and feelings have to be communicated to you somehow, but your own are so immediate and urgent and real. And so you have to, and he says that you have to choose to do the work of somehow altering or getting free of your natural hardwired default setting, which is to be deeply and literally self-centered and to see and interpret everything through your lens of self. So if somebody is going to try to do the work of uh, exercising control over the meaning they give to thought, that you have to be really conscious and aware enough to choose what to pay attention to and how you construct meaning from experience. Because if you can't, then you really are going to go through every single interaction you're having of saying, well, this is my interpretation, so now I need you to adhere to my interpretation, or I'm going to feel uncomfortable. I don't know. Your
Do
thoughts?
you think in the betrayal trauma realm that there are the betrayed, in this case with our book, the female partner, do you think there are some who decide what pornography addiction is, or do you think they decide what they're supposed to go through and
Oh,
in turn sometimes make things worse for themselves?
okay. This is yes. I really feel like the first part, yes, absolutely. They feel like, no, I know what this is. Again, it's the my experience as the betrayed spouse. I'm not saying me literally, but that it's like I already know. I know why you do it. I know it's about me, even if you say it isn't. I know that you got a problem that's bigger than you think you do. I know. So now I need you to admit that exactly the way that I think it is to make me feel better. But so yeah, you and I both worked with a lot of people with betrayal trauma, and it's really interesting because I've really been challenging for the last little while the concepts around full disclosure and that people don't even have the right way to communicate effectively to begin with, and even healthy relationships. But now we're going to go and we're going to drop some pretty big bombs right out of the gate, and then we're going to say now we'll be able to make sense of it or clean things up. When in reality, I feel like here's the wife in this scenario coming in and saying, I want to make sense of things. Like I need certainty, and my brain is going to ask questions until I get that certainty. But I'm sitting there saying, oh, it's bless your heart, you're not gonna get certainty. And the more questions you
Right.
ask, the more you're going to have. And then he's going to try to give you as much information as he can. But then at some point, then he's going to say, I don't even know. No, that isn't how I felt, or that isn't what happened,
Right.
or which will make her more angry. And then that just is not very helpful. So I do feel like a lot of times I have women that say, I know I need to know these things, or I know that I got to just get this all out there. Or I know, because they've read or heard things that say you need to have,
Right.
right. And that's where then I'll go 2-3 years down the road after disclosure or whatever, and the couple now finally has the tools to communicate, and then she'll say, I wish I didn't know all those things. And so
Yeah.
I have been very intentional myself of kicking the can of disclosure down the road as far as I can, and then saying, okay, right now we're going to avoid question mode, and we're going to start to learn how to communicate effectively, because no one has those tools. And so if we're going to try to jump in and tackle these high charge topics that already I feel like the memory is suspect to begin with, the guy is going to try to limit a lot of the information he shares, not even
Hmm.
from a he's a jerk standpoint, but he doesn't want to self confront some of that shame or the reasons why,
Absolutely.
right? And then
Absolutely.
he wants to feed her little bits of information to then say, okay, is that almost like subconscious, is that good enough, like what
Yeah.
can you like kind of be calm? But then when he does that, he's encouraging a staggered disclosure, that the more she hammers away, then he'll eventually say, okay, no, I did. Okay, yes, you got me. I this many times, or I did. And it's like, well, why? And then all of a sudden now we're still trying to make sense of things that he can't make sense of, and she's not going to be able to really empathetically look at his side. So anyway, that's a long-winded way for me to say I like your question, and the answer is yes. And that's where I feel like sometimes it really just somebody wants to go in and know that somebody they're working with says, hey, I've got this, and here's the formula. And so you almost need to trust me and trust the process. And I think that can even calm their amygdala down sometimes. I don't know. What do you think?
Uh, I asked this specifically because I have a client that I feel like he's backed into a corner, and I don't know what the right piece of advice is. Um, he is doing very well with his pornography addiction recovery.
Mm-hmm.
His wife is not doing as well with her betrayal trauma, and I don't
Yeah.
see her for that. I see him. She sits in on maybe one out of every 5 or 6 sessions, and those sessions are rough because it feels like she wants to run the session
Yeah,
and
totally.
tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
then on top of that, she has he's going through certain motions of recovery that he feels like he doesn't need. Like,
Yes.
she has decided he needs 12 step groups. Are you supposed to stand up and say, no, this is not right? And then, you know,
Oh, your
make
question.
things even worse? It's a tough conundrum.
Well, and it's so funny you're saying this, Josh, because we record these early on a Thursday morning. Wednesdays are my men's group, and this was the entire hour last night, because the new guy in the group, and this is the question he's asking, and it was literally around the 12 step stuff, because I've facilitated the 12 step model or groups, and I they're not evidence based. They're based off of the medical model, the disease model, and so
Hmm.
I feel like if one views them as it's something to do instead of ruminate or think, or they're out there to have a connection with others. But then there are other people, if they go there and it makes them feel worse, it makes them feel like the heaviness of the 12 step meeting, the no crosstalk, they just feel and they have to perform, or then it can make it worse. And so that's where this guy was saying the exact thing. So then I was saying, okay, you're the only person that knows if it really is making it worse, or if you just don't want to do it. And so, if he is able to stand in that healthy ego and then say, man, I hear you. And, but what I'm going to need is a little trust here. And of course she'll say, how can I trust you? I mean, you just disclosed, or there's been D-Day. And that's
Yeah.
where I need to help a guy say, okay, boy, I hear you, and I can empathize. But I feel like I have the right tools now. I've never felt like I've had the right tools. These are the right tools. But then I think it's fair to then work out an agreement of sorts, where if she's saying, okay, I would love to offer you that, but what I would need from you then is maybe to, I don't know, to hear more about what these tools are, or to just know that, can I just be aware of the process a little bit more? Because you just saying I'm handling it. We've tried that one before, but
Right.
yeah, right. So I love the question. So that's a tricky one.